Hello, and at last, welcome back to Sensational She-Geek, live from Yancey Street. This is episode 99. Do I have plans for something special for episode 100? Absolutely not, but I will take ideas. This week, we're going to be doing things a bit, a bit differently. We'll kind of see how things go. I keep biting my tongue, so we'll see how long I last. We'll start off with the tarot card of the week, per usual. This week is card number 12, the Hanged Man, or the Hanged One, as some people say. We have a little bit of comic book news. It's going to be a little bit of a bitch fest, I'm not going to lie. But then some cool stuff too, so what can I say? There's a lot of comics that we're catching up on in the recent reads, and we'll be talking the two events from Marvel and DC that are happening. It's Night Terrors and then the X-Men Before the Fall. These are setting up the summer event that's called the fall instead of the fall event called the fall. Don't get me started on that. And then, Night Terrors at DC. A little bit of comics next week, which is mostly going to be Night Terrors and some Marvel stuff. Well, it's actually it's a lot of Big Two stuff for next week. Then in TV anime, there's a lot of cool anime that's been coming out with English dubs because the new summer season has started. We'll talk a little bit about that, including Adam being here to talk Jujutsu Kaisen. Some other things, My Happy Marriage, we've been watching together, and some other cool stuff. And then in the, we've combined the, anime news and the other news, so we'll talk some stuff, including the Deadpool 3 stuff, some Comic-Con business because of the hotel strike. Fun fact, I have a degree in hospitality management, so I know all about the workings of hotels, so it's kind of interesting for me with that background to hear about all of what's going on in San Diego and really across the industry. And then there's also the other strikes that are happening in Hollywood, so all of that is going to get talked about. It's all kind of important things because scary stuff is happening and really, frankly, morally corrupt stuff. And then, of course, we'll wrap up. Adam's been a lot more into Secret Invasion than I have. I will not lie. So he will probably lead that discussion. And then Strange New Worlds. There's 3 episodes that we'll be covering. It's episodes 2, 3, or rather it's 3, 4, and 5 is what we'll be covering. Really been loving what they've been doing with the season. Super happy just to have a season 2, to be honest. So that's what today's episode is going to more or less look like. We are also having minor microphone recording issues. It seems like the first few seconds of each clip are a little bit warbly, so I apologize for that. I will be replacing this microphone ASAP. But in the meantime, you can help me get a nicer microphone than this one that's lasted me about 2 years only by donating on my various, Ko-fi and Patreon and stuff like that. I actually don't have a Patreon anymore. It was kind of silly. But other things, yes. So we'll go ahead and get started anyway. Just mind the warbliness. The tarot card of the week is the Hanged Man. We'll be talking history, which is really going to have a lot of the description and symbolism in there. So we don't have a specific description and symbolism section. We'll just skip straight to interpretation and meaning, still very much tied into history as well. A little bit of pop culture, including the anime tarot, the Marvel tarot, and more JoJo references. And then we'll have a little summary, once again provided by me finding it on tarotHeritage.com, which is a fantastic read for certain Major Arcana tarot cards. Really great history and whatnot. So, starting with the history, known in the 15th century, this card was known as the Traitor, originally based on shame paintings, public art done on traitors who skipped town before their executions. These paintings were commissioned by the heads of Italian city-states as revenge on those who betray them. They are meant to be recognizable portraits of contorted agony, no doubt biblical. The Medicis of Florence, yes, those Medicis, they made a show about them that I'm sure was very dramatic. They commissioned the most of these in their town, usually after the family defeated yet another rebellion. Artist Andrea del Castagno did so many that he became known as, in the English version, Andy the Hanged Man. Popes also commissioned these works. Pius II loathed the Lord of Rimini, condemning him to hell for eternity, burning an effigy of him, which was very un-Catholic of him, and ordering a shame painting done of him. Shame paintings would also contain words of the figure introducing themselves and what exactly it was that they did. It seems the number 12 has a connection to the Hanged Man as a traitor as well. And Attendolo betrayed the church 12 times. Judas was the 12th disciple. The upright posts of the Tarot de Marseille gibbet have 12 red stubs where branches have been lopped off. The number was undoubtedly chosen for its symbolic value. The most gruesome Hanged Man can still be seen in Bologna. The head of the Bolognini, my bad guys, family commissioned a fresco of hell in 1410 for the family chapel in Basilica di San Petronio. He told the artist to make it as horrible as possible. The artist, Giovanni da Modena, delivered a grotesque scene centered on a man-eating devil. Near the upper edge, 2 men hang upside down, labeled idolaters and Ninusrex, a reference to the founder of the city of Nineveh, a hotbed of pagan idolatry. Idolaters are the ultimate traitors against God because they worship false images, that is, images not approved by the church. See, that's why it's not very Catholic of him to have burned an effigy, because effigies themselves aren't at all Catholic. False idols. As for the Hanged Man symbolizing a traitor, a 1393 decree for Milan and Lombardy of the punishment of traitors said, Let him be drug on a wooden plank at a horse's tail to the palace of execution, and there be suspended by 1 foot to the gallows, and be left there until he is dead. As long as he lives, let him be given food and drink. A fortune-telling book, the Sigismondo Fanti book, published in 1527, depicts a hanged man in the center of a horoscope. The lines under it read, If you are inhuman, Marvel, or traitor to lords or relatives, in fact, in work, if you are without any respect, without reason, then I see you end your days in the air. Francesca Piscina from the Piedmont region of Italy wrote a discourse in 1565 on the moral lessons that can be found in tarot. He describes the Hanged Man as dishonest, false, vicious, pestiferous at the same time in central Italy. An anonymous author wrote a moralizing discourse on tarot where he referred to the card as the traitor. On changing to the serene and detached face for such a tortured person, shame paintings depicted the victim writhing in agony, yet the tarot card usually shows him serene and detached. The image may have been sanitized, since the disturbing sight of a hanged man in agony would have dampened the atmosphere around the card table. Tortured and martyred saints maintain their serenity because they have transcended the human condition. An example is Saint Peter Martyr, who appears unfazed by the scimitar embedded in his skull. Serene hanged men set the stage for the 19th century spiritualized hanged man, passively surrendering to God's will. In his book, The Pictorial Key to Tarot, Waite says the hanged man is not suffering, he's in a trance, his life is in suspension. Waite, a Christian mystic, said this card is essentially about the relationship between the divine and the universe and the promise of resurrection. As for the card's evolution of design, some early Italian cards, like those in the Rothschild and Rosenwald sheets, show the hanged man holding bags of money, which has been interpreted as a reference to Judas. But he might also be a dishonest banker or the mercenary soldier who switches sides depending on who's offering the most money. In the 17th and 18th centuries, some card printers turned the hanged man right side up. Antoine Court de Gebelin, the first person we know to write about esoteric tarot, said the card makers show their ignorance when they print the hanged man upside down. He tells us the hanged man is the cardinal virtue prudence, even though this figure has none of the classic attributes of prudence. Authors who say this card means wisdom and discernment are looking back at this attribution. France did not have a tradition of shame paintings, so the average French card player was probably ignorant of the card's original meaning, furthermore, not curious about it. Le Pendu and the later Italian name La Peso refer to the fact that he's hanging, but not necessarily a criminal. For card players, all that matters is where the card stands in the hierarchy of the Trump series, what card it can capture, and who it can be captured by. This lack of cultural context meant the Hanged Man card was a blank slate ready to be reimagined by 18th century occultists. French occultist de Gébelin and Italia in the 18th century, and Oswald Wirth a century later, introduced the Hanged Man as a spiritual seeker who has reached a turning point in his life path. Trump's 1 through 11 describe the active life of testing your own powers and learning self-mastery, culminating in the Strength card. The Hanged Man inverts these worldly values and surrenders to a higher power. He lets go of the past, reorients his thinking around a different set of values, and shifts his life direction radically. The Hanged Man is no longer of this world. He has transcended the human condition. His body is helpless, but his soul is free and emanates great spiritual power. The interpretation and meaning of the card, according to Mr. Waite in the early 20th century, he said it stood for wisdom, circumspection, discernment, trials, sacrifice, intuition, divination, and prophecy. He said reversed, it stood for selfishness, the crowd, and body politics. We have very little evidence for how tarot was interpreted for fortune-telling in the 15th and 16th centuries, but it's clear that the Hanged Man card was considered a traitor. Some card meanings relating to this theme are betrayal of trust, betraying a friend, abandoning plans, and selling out. Your world has been turned upside down, and nothing can be relied on. It's about switching allegiances and changing your viewpoint. Your betrayal may have resulted in social humiliation, shame, loss of status, torture, and a violent death. As for pop culture references here for this card, in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stardust Crusaders, they use tarot cards to name characters' abilities, aka stands. The character Jay Gill has a stand called the Hanged Man. Do you remember Jay Gill? Is he not a very important character?
It's been a while since I've watched part 3.
Alright, so then that's moving on to the Marvel Tarot, which is the 2007 publication that Marvel put out, which is I guess you would say publicized journal of a character who is a kind of like mystical character in the Marvel universe. He goes through in the journal and assigns characters to most of the major arcana cards. And so here for the Hanged Man, he draws, you'll see Jericho, Brother Voodoo. What he says is, the Hanged Man card represents willing sacrifice. I was not sure at first why the deck would choose Brother Voodoo as the subject for this card. Every hero makes sacrifices when they decide to stand against the shadows, but Jericho Drum's sacrifice is not one that makes Brother Voodoo the subject of the card. I did a little research and learned the whole story of this heroic Hungan. The spirit of Jericho's brother, Daniel, gave up the peace of the afterlife to bond with his sibling, doubling Brother Voodoo's strength, will, and mystical potential. Now I think of him as Brothers Voodoo. That's an odd bit of lore that I didn't know about. Also, very different to what any of the history of the card has anything to say about. Did you have something you wanted to add at all? Okay, so then moving on to Anime Tarot, which is the Natasha Iglesias tarot deck, which assigns various archetypes and symbols to the various face cards, which include the Major Arcana and the trump cards of the Major Arcana. So let's go to card number 12. The Hanged Man, who is the isekai hero or heroine. What she says about this is, the Hanged Man's analog in anime is the isekai hero or heroine. Isekai have characters who've been transported to other worlds, places that usually have magic and rules that are vastly different from those the character is used to. Once transported, the hero or heroine must pause to reevaluate. They have to fully consider their new surroundings and decide how to move forward. Eventually, they surrender to the changed circumstances and embrace what comes, leading them toward adventure, success, romance, and self-sufficiency. So she talks about examples being Chihiro Ogino in Spirited Away, Kagome Higurashi in Inuyasha, Bedembek Spirits, Aoi Tsubaki, and then Starting Life in Another World, which I guess is RE0. Somebody please tell me how to say it without sounding stupid. Subaru Natsuki, which I understand there may not be a way to say it without sounding stupid. And then that time I got reincarnated as a slime, of course, Rimuru. I never finished that show. I couldn't really get into it that much, but there we go. As for our summary, how can we reconcile the early Italian trader with the contemporary hanged one who follows a path of personal transformation? They both stand outside the normal social order and both cling to unconventional values. The trader may be a criminal in the eyes of the establishment, but he risked his life to pursue something he valued. If the United States had lost the War of Independence, George Washington and all the founding fathers would have been hung as British traitors, but they would have entered American folklore as martyrs for freedom. The contemporary hanged one leads a courageous, unconventional life that is condemned by those who don't understand the inner process. These nonconformists know they must follow their heart or suffer a spiritual death, which I think a lot of people can probably relate to. Moving into comic books from there, we're going to skip over manga this week. Some comic book news. Over at DC Comics, the rumor is Jessica Shen is actually leaving DC Comics. If you're unfamiliar with her, she is a DC editor. She does a lot of the Bat Family stuff, Nightwing. I think she was not doing Harley Quinn, but she was working with, I want to say, a lot of the Bat Family stuff over the course of the years that she was there. And then, notably, in the past year or so, she was the one who initiated and set up the AAPI, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders initiative to have, what do they call it? It is part of Dawn of DC, and the initiative's called We Are Legends. It's 3 or 4 titles that are Asian and Asian American run, or led, and run, actually. And for the most part, they're really good. I really like Spirit World. It's a lot of hate because people are just ridiculous, but it's actually genuinely been really good in my opinion. And then there's a couple other ones, The Vigil, and those are the titles for that. So it's really interesting that she's now leaving DC after making that kind of big step, which is what I thought would be like a career move up step, but I guess it's going to gaming for her next. So I guess congratulations for her. Speaking of stuff happening at DC, a couple of years ago, they published 3 titles. Well, they published a number of titles in Japanese that were manga for DC characters. 3 of those now have been translated into English and are being published, I think, later this month. They are Batman, Justice Buster, Joker, One Operation Joker, and Superman vs. Meshi. Batman Justice Buster is a story of him being somewhat early on in his career, and he creates a security system called Robin. It's an acronym for something, I'm sure. Joker, One Operation Joker, is a story of Joker fighting Batman, who falls into a vat of acid and turns into a baby, and then he has to take care of the baby. Classic. Love it. I will be very thrilled to read that. And then Superman vs. Meshi is him and some food stuff that happens. Superman vs. Food is kind of what it sounds like. So that's the light content. Because we also need to talk about what's been announced coming in, October? Ms. Marvel, the New Mutant. I guess sorry for spoiling that if you didn't know about that, but that's happening. We talked about that when it was announced or when it was discovered or whatever, that leaked, I guess is what's right there, that she was going to be dying, getting killed, actually, that she would be, we theorized she would be becoming a mutant because, MCU synergy, something that's become very exhausting as a comics reader. And yes, it does look like that. What was that panel from? That was just one of the covers of the Ms. Marvel, the New Mutant.
With little bright lights.
Yeah,
that was
it's hard to tell so far if they're going to be doing the full extent of the power change. But there's the 2 covers that I've seen so far. One is an art germ cover where it does look like she has the embiggening, as she calls it, still from the comics. But then the one that just came out with her and Jean and Scott on the cover, it looks like she has almost Dazzler style light kind of powers. So we'll see how that is. I'm also, have to say, extremely disappointed in the design they gave her for her X-Men suit, I guess is what it's gonna be. really don't like it. It's very not good. It looks like every other, like, Ms. Marvel or Marvel Girl outfit, I guess it is what it is. I swear to God, if they start calling her Marvel Girl, I'm gonna spit on somebody. Sorry.
Someone might be into that.
I don't think they're gonna do that, because they technically have a Marvel Girl right now. I think. I'm not really sure who they're calling what when it comes to the Summers Gray clan. But anyway, MCU Synergy is really exhausting. They are kind of sacrificing the enjoyment of fans who've been at this for a little while, or who are aware of what was kind of going on before now, for trying to get new people to come in strictly because of the connection to the MCU. There's not really any other reason for new fans to come into this, except for the fact that, oh, they're making her a mutant like in the movies, in the show. I don't know if you think that I'm wrong about that at all.
Yeah, the annoying synergy of gearing the comics to, like, bring in new people after the movies. I kind of feel like it diminishes a lot of the curiosity that people would get, because versus, oh, nice, I saw Kamal on this TV show, now I'm going to go read the book, and now you're reading the same exact thing, versus you kind of get dropped into a story, and then you get all these questions, you're like, you know what, I want to go back and read more, instead of like, oh, this is the same character I'm seeing on a show. I feel like that kind of kills the enjoyment and curiosity that people would find trying to jump in.
I also think it's actually, I didn't think about this till just now, I think it's killing the enjoyment of the funny little tweaks they make and the differences from the comics to the MCU. Before, in the past, it was like, oh yeah, it's so fun that, like, for example, I thought it was so fun they made Marvel a woman. Little tiny tweaks. What's another one?
I mean, the honestly, most obvious one, the Nick Fury. Samuel Jackson, Nick Fury.
Well, that's not a good example, because that was one that ended up in the comics ASAP. But what I mean is, like, it's those little tiny changes are kind of fun sometimes. But at this point, I'm realizing that anytime I'm seeing those changes, my first thought is, all right, when are they going to do this in the comics? That's not fun. That's really, it kind of kills it for you. And I think it kind of kills the whole, like, relationship that the two have. Because if they're the same, then why are we doing this? Why are we just... I don't know, it doesn't feel right at all. It doesn't feel like the way that you handle adaptations.
Yeah.
Like, these are supposed to be adaptations of comic books, not the other way around. And I don't know, it's not great. And yes, Iman Vellani is apparently co-writing that. Good for her, and her fandom for being a Kamala fan and all that, for her knowing her whole teenage years, whatever. That's great. I always wonder, when they have these celebrity co-written titles, how much they actually contribute. And then also, it's all kind of a publicity stunt a little bit. Am I wrong? Getting her to be on the cover and saying, yeah, Iman Vellani okayed this, is kind of like, come on, guys. She said it's okay. I don't know. That's it. The whole thing is just kind of sour. And I will go over the Fallen Friend when we go through the Before the Fall titles, because that's going to be kind of tied into that, it sounds like. Which is coming up next, the recent reads and events. These are more or less in order of the week they came out, except for the events. So we'll go over a lot of these kind of quickly. Daredevil and Echo #2, I'm still enjoying this. The first issue ended with Dima Goblin, not Demo Goblin, the female version, coming in and fighting about some god they worship or something like that. God of demons, something along those lines. Something that has to do with the Dima Goblin is possessing these kids to go and cause these weird disasters like we saw in the first issue. And so she does it with a second kid. This time it's a little boy. And the kid wanders off to the church that's kind of the center of all of this going down. And as they follow the kid, Ghost Rider shows up and he's gonna murder this child because it's possessed by a demon. So that's gonna go, I'm sure, not at all violently. Harley Quinn number 31 was genuinely mediocre. I'm sorry, I really thought that I would enjoy the Harley and Ivy being together more than this, but I think I know who we can blame. All the creatives is what I'm blaming, including editorial and whoever sent them on this track, and whoever's idea it was to start drawing Harley with buck teeth. I understand that later in the issue, she does partially turn into a rabbit. She has those buck teeth the entire issue. What the heck? It was... Since when has that been her, like, face shape? That was like when there was one artist, in the Avengers, when Jason Aaron was doing it, who kept drawing She-Hulk with, like, the butt chin. She doesn't have a chin like that. She's never been drawn like that. Why does she have buck teeth? I don't understand. It was really unattractive, and I get that people didn't like Riley Rossmo's art because that's what they said, but it's also not at all her design, so I don't understand where they're going with that. She-Hulk number 13, yes, the dastardly attractive thief guy, whatever his name is, they ended up on a date or whatever, so we all knew this was coming. Captain Marvel, Dark Tempest number 1. You know, we were talking about this earlier, how the Captain Marvel of... I kind of came to the conclusion after watching part of Captain Marvel again the other day. That is not the comic book Captain Marvel or Carol Danvers in any way. They kind of made an OC, their original character, and they're calling her Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, similar to the way that they do with, you know, so many characters. They just like slip in, oh yeah, this is our take on this person, you know. But reading this Dark Tempest by Ann Nocenti and whoever the artist was, sorry dude, it feels like she's written like the MCU Captain Marvel, which I would call that being kind of like one of the boys. She wants to be one of the boys. She is one of the boys. Like, that's like the whole root of the character is what it feels like. In the Captain Marvel movie, of course, the boys was the Kree. There was only one female one among them anyway, so besides Carol. But that's what it kind of felt like. So I'm not super thrilled with it, but I'll probably keep up with it to be aware of what's happening with Carol, because I love the character. And she is getting the new series starting in October, by the writer of Spirit World, which I was just talking about that I like, and we'll go over another issue in a minute here. Moving on, Swan Songs, number 1. I did not realize this beforehand, but it's by the creator of Ice Cream Man. It's another anthology series that he's getting started here. I'm not sure if it's an anthology of stories about the end of the world, or about this one particular end of this world, and it's going to be various people on this planet when the world is ending. I'm not sure. Or is this going to be various destructive world-ending scenarios in each issue? I'm not sure. We'll have to wait to the second issue. Oh, by the way, the second issue has art by Tristan Winsigard. He was, hang on. Caspar is his first name. Really fantastic artist. He did, was it All Against All? No. Was it All Against All? No.
To finish that.
Yeah, it was All Against All. And then the one before that was about in 1994, the haunted house. Do you remember that one? The haunted house that had all the ghosts in it, and then they had like the mech that they made. It was that one.
Homesick Pilots.
Thank you, Homesick Pilots. That was where I first saw his art.
Yeah.
He's going to be on the next issue of Swan Song, so you bet your butt I'm checking that out. I will read anything that Caspar Wingard, please tell me how to say that, will do the art for, because it's incredible. It's kind of like Phil Noto for me. Although Phil Noto's pretty much only at Marvel right now. I'd love to see him do something indie. Oh my god, could you imagine? Yes, I can, and it's fantastic. Silk number 2. This is another Silk 5-shot. It's like the 4th they've given her in the past few years. It's very frustrating. Just let it continue into the next series. Instead of starting another one every 4 or 5 months. It's silly. But in this issue, Silk is still trapped in the dreamscape, but we do get a little flashback to her brother, who had some issues with demon clans, I think, in the past, but now is an upstanding citizen, and worried about what's happening with his sister. and kind of walks in on what's happening with his sister, her being held in stasis by evil lady from the last series. So why didn't they just make it one? I don't know.
Mm.
Doctor Strange number 5, you once again have Clea and Steven going towards... Actually, you know what? Was there 5 and 6? No, it was just 5. Clea and Steven going to Umar's wedding. Good for her and all that. She is very open. They're both very open about the fact that they're only doing this for power. And that's great. Good for them. That's genuinely completely along her character. Odd thing, though, she has... Okay, so I'm really torn about this. When Umar gave birth to Clea, she lost her ability to change into her Faltine form. The Faltine, which is what Umar and Dormammu are, because they're brother and sister, they're technically like twins. Although that terminology would disgust them because the Faltine are bodiless. They are completely disgusted by bodies, by physical anything, and by the terminology of familyhood, which designates having, separated yourself into this other thing. Generally, Faltines are all about kind of the same. But these two were different, Umar and Dormammu. They took human forms to see what it was like, and they went to the Dark Dimension after being kicked out of their own place. Umar has a relationship with, what's his name? Something, Clea's father. And that's how Clea comes to be. When she gives birth to Clea, she cannot go back to her Faltine form. So, she always talks about how disgusted she is with her human body and how the experience of having sex with her father and of creating that life was an absolutely disgusting experience. Which oddly, I can kind of jive with that. So here she is. This is why I'm torn in the fact that she's having another baby, but they have conceived it and are cooking it, I guess so to say, completely magically outside of her body. They have a magical case, basically, that the fetus is in, that it's just sitting there cooking in, and whenever she's ready for it to be grown, she can, I guess, finish growing it and pop it out. That's so Umar of her, because she hated she says it even in the comic, I will never make another life from my body again, or something like that. It sounds like generally disgusted with having had a baby in the past that way. It's kind of cool, but also, I don't know about Clea having a sister. This feels like something that they're gonna find a way to screw up. And then the issue ends with Steven's, other self from the Dark Dimension or something. It's not the Dark Dimension. From a darker dimension or reality coming through. I gotta catch up on the lore of this evil Stephen Strange. It's like General Strange or something like that, so I gotta catch up on the lore of that so I know what the heck it is. But it's an evil Stephen, and he shows up to the wedding because he can, I guess. Grimm number 11 is pretty cool. The end is going to get released, which is probably not going to be good because it is the end and it can make the end. And then our main characters are trapped under the river Styx, but since the end is getting released, and I have to go, this is kind of a little bit of a trope, a lame trope, but since there's a bigger evil now, the villain of the series is turning to her, the main character, the heroine, I guess you could say, Jess, to have her take her father's death scythe, which is the super powerful one that she can use the way that her father could, to fix everything and become really death, probably, is what it'll be. So it's a little bit of a trope that she's like, oh, I gotta stop my plan so we can save the world together. It's whatever, but I guess she's not that evil. Hairball number 4, I didn't realize, I think is the final issue. I thought it was a 5-issue series. It's actually 4 from Dark Horse. It's kind of a funny ending because the whole series has gone so far about, she's talking to somebody about her experience so far with this cat, this evil demonic cat called Bestie. And you think it's like a therapist or something. And she's talking about how this horrible, she killed it a bunch of times and it just kept coming back. It literally burned down her house. It tried to kill her parents, all this stuff that it made happen. And she was aware of it. And the fact that it had these weird, worms crawling all over her to whisper, creepy stuff in her ears at night. That part I still don't quite understand, to be honest. But besides all that, in the end, it's kind of revealed that she's been talking to Bestie this whole time, because when she reunites with Bestie after tracking her down again, she discovers that the kid that Bestie has moved in with is in a shitty domestic abuse situation, and so she helps Bestie kill the dad. Who is the problem in this scenario. And so now she and Bestie are going to go around killing shitty parents, is what it looks like. I kind of love that. Murder Team with Cat. Moving on to Adventures of Superman, Jon Kent, number 5. This is not a series that I've been reading. It's only 5 issues in, so I'm sure I could catch up real quick if I wanted to. It's obviously from DC. It's following, obviously, Jon Kent, as the title suggests. What's cool about this is Jon is in the Injustice universe now, at year 5, so it's not like way down the line when we know everything's over and I think our world Superman goes in and stops him or whatever. Another world Superman. This is 5 years in. Ma and Pa Kent are both still alive. Jon has, I guess, I didn't read the previous issue, so I gathered is Jon met the Superman of that universe who, gathering that this is his child who he should have had, would the Joker have not killed Lois the way that he did, that this would be his kid, and he's like struck by that, and so he has this obvious immediate soft spot. And Robin, aka Damien, because that's who that is, because he killed Dick on accident, kind of. Robin is like, dude, Superman, you're obviously have a weak spot for him. Which is true, he does. So he ends up accidentally outing the Injustice team, whatever you would call them, Batman side, I guess, where they are to Superman. But they don't attack them until they're sure Jon's not there anymore, because gotta keep Jon Boy safe. I think that's hilarious that he's got such a weakness for Jon, being even from another universe and much, much older than his own son would have been. Even if that was going to be Jon, who she was pregnant with at that time. And that is a to-be-continued situation, so we'll see how that kind of goes from there. Antarctica number 1 is kind of nothing really so far. This girl had a dad who was in secret military stuff, and then I guess when her mom died and he never came back, she decides to make it her life's goal to track him down, and all she knew was that he mentioned Antarctica, so she gets herself to a military base or whatever in Antarctica, and out in the snow one night, she runs into her future self, who is a doctor of whatever it is that she just started studying out in Antarctica. So, it's interesting enough. I'll see what the second issue does. Loki number 2, it looks like he's going to be tracking down various evil weapons made out of the, boat pieces. Yeah, it's fine. The lore of it, I guess, is pretty cool. The actual happening of it, I guess, makes sense. I like the part where the dwarf tries to turn Loki's crown, made of gold, into a... he tries to turn it into a bow, so that he can use all the magic that the gold soaked up over the years of Loki wearing it against the oncoming army. But it's trickster magic, so what happens when he fires it? He blows up. I thought that was kind of smart, because, yeah, Loki's crown, if you make it into a weapon, probably isn't going to do anything but hurt you. Spirit World number 3, again, I really enjoyed. Constantine and Batgirl being the side characters is pretty fun. And you're getting a lot of Chinese mythology in it as well. Unfortunately, as for Marvel Pride, 2023 was not a whole lot for me to like in that. I don't know who half the characters were. I don't really care to find out. That's kind of it, yeah. The Gwenpool one was fine, I guess, but, and I did like the Black Cat, story, even though it didn't make sense that Remy was there. I guess it was just New Orleans, and that was how she got her in, because then she steals the stone for the goddess of thieves and asks her out on a date. I thought it was pretty funny. So that leaves us with Night Terrors and Before the Fall. at Before the Fall, we have 4 comics to cover. So starting with the 2 Before the Fall comics, Heralds of Apocalypse and Sinister 4. Didn't care at all for Heralds of Apocalypse, won't not saying anything else about it. As for Sinister 4, it kind of proves that whole melodrama. It didn't really have to be an entire event. It could have just been a few issues. I can give you the rundown, though, for the Sins of Sinister, that's what it was called. It was basically Sinister figured out how to put his own, like, genetic coding into the Five's rebirth chambers, let's say. So every time somebody gets brought back, they have, like, a genetic trigger in them that he can snap his fingers. Try to snap, didn't work. There we go. Snap his fingers one day, and they're all under his control. All at the same time, all of a sudden. So in the Sins of Sinister timeline, that all happens, and everything goes to shit, basically. And then they undo that timeline, but unfortunately, everybody remembers, is what it seems to be. So that's the issue. So now, in Before the Fall, Sinister 4 was just kind of like a wrap-up of that, basically. And then you get a basic description of who the 4 Sinister characters are. It's like the old man version of him, the version who thinks it's the real him, the him that we've known who is currently trapped in the pit on Krakoa, and then the female version who was, I guess, a clone of his dead wife. So there you go. And she's like wild magical, and they gave her like some really bizarre out there stuff to work with magically. I don't know if it really works, but it is what it is. But anyway, so the whole thing that's happening now with Before the Fall, I can kind of run down. It's actually what went down in Immortal X-Men, more or less. Is the Krakoa itself, the tree, the mutant Krakoa is dying. No, it's rotting, is what they're saying. The leaves are falling, and that's the whole, it's fall. And the reason for that is, you remember back when Hickman was doing the Hickman thing, and he said that Krakoa would normally feed off of, like, it would kill, like, a whole person and consume them every now and then, and that's how it survives. But since there's so many mutants living on it, it can just take, like, itsy-bitsy little bits here and there from all of them, and that's how it's sustained. Well, what just happened with Sins of Sinister was basically everybody lost faith in their leaders, including, and most importantly, Xavier, Professor X. And so now when it's feeding off of all the mutants, it's feeding off of all of this bad juju, basically. And this bad emotion towards their leadership and towards the core of the X-Men themselves. And that's why the leaves are falling and stuff. And so Krakoa tells Doug, basically, that the only way to get the trust back is to abolish the council, the Quiet Council, which at this point, half of them can't vote anyway, so I don't know what the point was for them to be around, with only half of them with voting power. And so I think what they're going to do is try democracy, but then as soon as Doug tells Krakoa, okay, they're in, Krakoa grabs him and drags him down into what we can only assume is the pit, and he is out of reach for Hope to reach for the powers, except for her to get the message from Krakoa that they're doing it for his own good, just to protect Doug. And then at the same time, Irene, who is, of course, can see the future and various future, she's a precog, she can see various future timelines. She can't see the future anymore. All she sees is blank white. So that's clearly what the fall is going to be about, is that big mistake that they made. Just generally all of it, just everything since Hickman left. Let's just go with that as the big mistake. And that leads us to Fallen Friend, the death of Ms. Marvel, which I'm adding into this Before the Fall thing, because I feel like that's appropriate. You get 3 stories in this. There's a few interesting takes that you can have, and I'm trying not to get too problematic with some stuff here. I'm not a big fan of G. Willow Wilson these days. Mostly because of what she's been doing with Poison Ivy. There's particular bits of the writing that feel very disrespectful, and I can't believe they're letting her get away with that. But that's for another time. She's writing the first story. It's fine, I guess. I'm a little bit peeved that G. Willow Wilson a white Muslim woman born in America to white family, and white ancestors, is the main person who's kind of known for writing Ms. Marvel. And it kind of shows in this first chapter. You can feel it a little bit when Carol shows up. I don't know, maybe it's just me. That's the first chapter. Basically, this issue is people show up to the mosque to read the Quran, which is a final rites kind of thing for friends and family. And the second story is by Mark Waid. It's focused on the Champions characters. A lot better. Mark Waid knows the Champions really well. If you haven't read his Invisible Woman series, I highly recommend that. Some very smart stuff in there. And so what he does basically is he has Viv and the female daughter to Vision, you know, she and Braun, who is Amadeus Cho, get into a big argument about various things, and then he yells at her about how, oh, well, you should just shut up about this because basically you have your emotions turned off. You go ahead and turn them on, see how it feels. And she does. And she doesn't like it, and she gets really upset, and so all the emotions of the death of her parents and her own death and stuff that happened recently comes back. And so she runs off, and then he's like, well, what do you mean you're upset? You can just turn them off. And they're all like, dude, are you shitting me right now? Like, you screwed up there. And it kind of ends with Viv going into like a cellar and sitting there and crying and being like, I'm so sorry, I love you and I miss you, and then turning her emotions off again, and that's how it ends. It's just like her blank face. It's really kind of sad. It hits a lot harder, for sure, than I think the first story did. And then the third one was Saladin Ahmed, who is another great Ms. Marvel writer, and he did a really great job. Interestingly, in all three of these stories, they're all reading bits of the Quran, but he is the only one who bothered to translate what they're saying for some reason. And it's needed to be done. It's very important, I think, that was to be done, so I'm glad they did that. And then we have a little bit of Peter Parker who shows up. It's whatever. It's fine, I guess. Also, the fact they drew Logan very tall in this was strange to me. He is notoriously a short dude, a stocky little guy. But okay, they drew him as the tallest person in the room in the first story. It was weird. And then the next day after this issue came out, they announced the Ms. Marvel, the New Mutant. So I guess we had our time to grieve, and now we're moving on. And that leaves us with the Night Terrors event at DC. If you haven't caught up with that at all, I actually haven't caught up entirely with it. I only have the first week of books that I've read so far, to be honest. We can catch up more next time. Basically, a villain named Insomnia has struck. He may or may not be related to stuff in the Sandman universe, because he's looking for the Nightmare Stone, I believe. Yes. And the Dream Stone is the source of Dream's powers in the Sandman universe. So we'll see if that's how that kind of works. Maybe they're about to give us Nightmare in the DC universe. Maybe that's what Insomnia is. It kind of is, actually. Basically, he's put all of the world to sleep, and they're dreaming their worst fears. So first you get the first one that they have to read, I guess, is Night Terrors First Blood #1. That's where you get kind of the intro of him looking for the Nightmare Stone, potentially related to formerly Vertigo comics, but again, we really can't tell right now from what I've read. In the Batman, Night Terrors Batman #1 is pretty much standard Batman trauma shit, and he gets it all sorted out by the end. Nothing too surprising. It's a little bit cool, I will not lie. Night Terrors Poison Ivy, really not a super big fan with this. It was okay. It was fine. I think it ended with Ivy being aware of what was going on and that she was in a dream world, I believe. And also I forgot that the Harley Quinn 31 actually ended with Batman calling Harley, of all people, to get her to come help him with the situation. If I understood that correctly. I don't know, I was too distracted by her buck teeth, which were just there. Other issues that have come out that I haven't caught up with yet. For Night Terrors, you get Black Adam, Ravager, the Joker, Zatanna, Robin, Green Lantern, Shazam, the Flash, and then the Night Terrors #1, which I think is going to be 3 issues of the main thing. But that's pretty much what's happening with that. I know the Zatanna story people really, really enjoyed. You get Lucas Wernick art with that one. It's really fantastic. I've seen some shots of him posting it. I really love it. He's a great artist. He was on not Hellions. It was the one that North Star was in the book by Leah Williams. But really great art. Really love to see. I think he was doing some other DC stuff earlier this year, so love to see him at DC. And I'll have to catch up with the others and talk about more of them next week. So it's just a constant catch-up process here, guys. But next week, what's coming out, aside from Before the Fall and Night Terrors, we have a bunch of #1s. It's literally, on my pull list, there's a ton more comics coming out, but for my pull list, there's a bunch of #1s. You have Mark Millar's Big Game #1. Millar's a weird dude, but I'm curious where he's going with this. This is the spin-out, or really the follow-up to Ambassadors. We are getting a new series for Blade, Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Redder. Hawk Girl #1 should be called Hawk Woman, I'm not gonna lie. Moon Knight, City of the Dead #1 you may want to pick up, because it's actually the first appearance of the Scarlet Scarab MCU style. But I don't think they're changing anything about the previous Scarlet Scarab. I think it's just her first appearance. There's also a new Red Sonja series kicking off, something called Scrapper #1, and Tales of the Titans #1, which is going to be about Starfire's origin. For Before the Fall at Marvel, they have X-Men Red #13, and then for Night Terrors, we're getting the #1s of the 2 shots for Catwoman, Nightwing, Punchline, Superman, and Wonder Woman. They keep trying to make Punchline a thing.
I forgot about her.
Yeah, I guess they still have plans with her if they're putting her here, so we'll see. That leads us into movies, TVs, and anime. Movies, TV, and anime. For what's new and noteworthy stuff that we're watching, there's only one live-action show on here, so we're talking about that first. That is Hijack, currently happening on AppleTV+. Wednesdays with Idris Elba. It's really good. Anything you want to say about... Well, the basic plot, obviously, it's a plane and it gets hijacked by, let's call them domestic terrorists. British domestic terrorists. What do you think about Hijack, Adam?
I think it's awesome. We were talking about it the other day about how a lot of the Apple Plus shows are really, really, really well written.
Yeah.
They don't spend time holding your hand and spending like a pointless 10 minutes explaining an obvious plot detail that you can just flash by, or just show a character actually acting out the moment, so then you don't need the unneeded, exposition explaining it to you.
It's kind of the way that they've changed comics, to make a weird metaphor.
Yes.
How they used to write all of this stuff, and now they kind of just work on showing you and letting you come to your conclusions a lot better.
Yes, it's exactly like that. And Idris Elba, it kills it.
Yes, he's fantastic.
I will watch him in anything. The dude's great. He plays as a guy whose job is basically to negotiate huge business deals. And so, of course, in this kind of situation, where the plane gets hijacked, that ability that he does kind of kicks in, and it's really cool, because it's almost kind of, there's the...
You're almost not sure what side, what his intention is a lot.
It is, and it's kind of funny because, normally you have the people like, oh, I'm trained in hostage negotiations. He's just trained in, getting people a win-win deal situation. And I think that's what makes this really cool and intriguing, is that he's not like, oh, yeah, I'm here for the betterment of people. He's like, nah, man, nah, bruv, I just want to get home. Straight up, he's like, I just want to get home. I don't give a shit about you. I don't give a shit about anybody here. I just want to get home. And that's real and accurate to, I think, anybody in a situation who's, trapped in a plane like that.
Something that I thought was really, I want to say unique about this one, maybe it's not, but as a hijack story or a hostage situation story, was you start this whole thing thinking these guys are in charge of their own, the guy who you see who has the gun in the beginning, whatever you want to call him, the guy who's the obvious leader, you think he's the leader of the entire operation. You get to a certain point, I want to say in the second episode, where he makes a phone call to tell somebody, all right, we've done it, we're successful, now it's your move. like clearly waiting for instructions, but he leaves a voicemail. They do not get back to him. At that point, we were like, oh, okay, so somebody was screwing with him. Some kid on the dark web tricked him into thinking that they were some important person who was going to do X, Y, and Z if they did this stuff because they got the ins and the outs and whatever. But now, to where we've caught up to now, no, these idiots were just... I mean, it's a little bit close to that because they have been completely screwed over. They are entirely just pawns in this situation. And whatever they thought they were going to get intel from their bosses, their anonymous probably bosses... they were never going to get anything. As soon as they sent that message that we did it, that was probably all that they had planned for these guys on the plane. And the rest is just like what they're going to negotiate with the government. In the last episode, they finally got the thing. A random dude walks up to the government person, hands him an envelope that says, what was it? Terms or demands?
Demands, yeah, that's what it
demands.
was. Yes, demands.
And I was like, okay, that's it. And the guy just walks off after handing him the envelope, and it's a list of stuff. And I'm sure those poor fools on the plane with the guns who think that they were about to get something are probably going to get shot by police when the plane lands. And that's about all that they were ever going to do, no matter what they thought. I don't know how they're going to get out of this alive. Yeah, also the dude who got stabbed, definitely dying. Really interesting that they showed how much, like, the adrenaline kept him alive longer, let's say. Like, he didn't notice he even got stabbed at first. He thought he just got kicked, and that was definitely the adrenaline of hijacking a plane. But yeah, that one's really great. We won't go into the rest of these probably quite as much, except for the last one, which is a Max show. You can probably guess what it is. Did you want to mention anything about Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, which has kicked off?
Yeah, it's my favorite arc.
Nice.
It's everybody loves the Shibuya incident, which is after this. I love the one of the secret inventory arc. Which is where you see a lot of younger Gojo and Geto, and then you also see how Megami comes to be, which is one of the other main characters. But and then this arc that's happening now, I think now it's about 15 years in the past. Everything that happens in this is influencing everything that's currently going on in the manga right now. So that's why it's kind of like a big event and why it's my favorite. And you also get a lot of nuance with the main characters, like people you didn't really, see or hear more about. You're like getting to see like young Gojo. You get to see the young principal, and then also how once you see the story of when Yuji comes in and all of them, how the school was run by old ways, and you start to see when Gojo comes in, he starts to change it to like new ways and progressive and like letting the younger generation figure out. Versus in this time period, it's like a bunch of bureaucracy of old people sitting around and going, no, we have to stick to the old ways and follow the rules. So it's really kind of cool, and I like watching it now animated because it's like, oh yeah, this really was a lot of core changes that happen. Is you don't notice it as you're reading, but then 100 chapters later, you're like, oh damn, this was actually a really big arc and really changes the whole perspective of how the manga goes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Some other animes I've been catching up with. I don't think I'm gonna actually be watching Masamune-kun's Revenge R because I haven't finished the first season. I don't really like it. I thought I was going to. And that's why I'm mentioning it, because I've dropped it since I added it to this list. But on Netflix, on Wednesdays, they do same-day English dub releases of My Happy Marriage, which we both really like.
Yes.
It's a very... I almost want to say like cliche story of the downtrodden girl in the family who gets sent off to marry the far off guy somewhere, and there's all these rumors about how he's such a strict, horrible man, and then she gets there and he's like, the only thing that he's really upset about is how timid she is. And that's kind of where we're at now. It's obviously got good bones to it, so I'm looking forward to more of it. There's a couple of new English dubs on Crunchyroll that I'm a little bit torn about. You get My Unique Skill Makes Me OP Even at Level 1, Sweet Reincarnation, and Am I Actually the Strongest? Those are all isekais that are kind of like... the cliche of, the sad old guy dies, the sad middle-aged guy dies, and now he's reborn as this young boy who has all of these women who are so dedicated to him as soon as they meet him, but there's not really any explanation as to why. And that's like literally the show. He's this young boy with all of these hot, tittylicious women who are just like fawning over him, but not all in the romantic way. They're just highly dedicated to him in various ways. So we'll see how those go. Horimiya is coming back, or has come back, with The Missing Pieces, which is season 2. The English dub of that has started. My Tiny Senpai's English dub has started. I did not like the manga of it because it was pretty much like a webcomic and I didn't like the format. But this is a much more digestible version for me, so that's great. And then Ayaka is a weirder one. I'm sure it's based off of some great story. It has a lot to do with mysticism, so it's a little bit of a different take, I want to say, on a lot of animes that have been coming out. It's mysticism, like, in the real world. And so it'll be, I don't know, we'll see how that one goes. But the last one we'll talk about is My Adventures with Superman, which is really good. It's on Max. It's a couple of episodes out. I want to say 3 episodes. It is very much a anime-style Superman show. You were talking about some things you liked about it.
Yeah, I like how they're giving us a Superman who's and he just became episode 2 he gets the suit. You're seeing a Clark who hasn't yet figured out his Kryptonian heritage and that how what it all means to be Superman quite yet. He has the bones of definitely because that's a lot. That's where the Mom Pa Kent stuff comes in. Them raising him with those ideals to help out the others, and that he is a stronger person, so he should help out others who can't. So it's really cool to watch him go through that with us as well, figuring out what am I, what should I do, how should I use these powers, why did I get here? He doesn't even know Kryptonian yet. He doesn't even understand it. The only things that I could pick up was his dad said Jor-El and Kal-El. That was it. The rest of it was just, language they put in there. I love this interpretation of Lois. It's
a little shitster.
She's a little shitster, which is very much on character for her, and I don't think we've ever seen a younger, this kind of young aged Lois and Clark before. So you're really, because she's not a reporter yet. She's still a fucking intern. And
They're interns, yeah.
Yeah, she's still an intern, so that's even better to see that, she's not established. You get to watch her get to that point, and then you see where she gets that feistiness, and just like you said, a little bit of shit stir in her. Her, Jimmy, and Superman / Clark's dynamic is great.
Yes.
I love how it's just when he meets up with Jimmy, they're literally roommates in the city in fucking bunk beds at 20 years old. It's hilarious and it's great. Yeah,
I think it works really well. There have been some complaints about the character designs being femme. If you don't know that this is based off of anime designs, very clearly in the way that they're animating this, I don't know what to tell you, man. Plus, this is very young Clark Kent. If you're gonna have a very young adjacent Wade, no, not Wade, Wilson, what's his name?
Slade Wilson,
Slade,
yeah, I was about to
Wade.
talk about him, yeah.
Yes, he's gonna be younger. He hasn't been through the bullshit quite as much as he will in 10 years or 15 years when the Teen Titans start to come into the picture. And he takes a turn in life that we don't need to talk about.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because we're actually seeing, a Slade Wilson who's not a total creep. Which I kind of hope is this is going to try and redeem him a little bit and just not make him like that. He's just somebody who works for Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I like how I think they're going to ease us into it, because at first, you see Livewire, and Silver Banshee. But they show up, but they're not metahumans. They are in the comics. I think they're going to ease us into that. Right now, their powers are military tech / alien based. I think eventually they'll get into the metahumans as he starts to learn his powers more.
Oh, yeah. In news, there's a couple of things to talk about. Hotels and actors and writers are all on strike as con season has officially kicked off. This complicates things. Starting with the hotel thing, they're not asking for that much, let's be honest. This is going to be an issue because if half of your staff in the hotel isn't working and you have packed hotels, you see, it's just gonna, I have no idea how that's going to go. I really hope they're working with their strikers. But then the other strike, of course, is the writer's strike, which has been going on for, I think, a couple of, 3 or 4 months now. And then now, just a few days ago, started officially the SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild, Screen Acting Film Writers Guild?
SAG-AFTRA or something?
Screen Acting Guild. AFTRA is American Film and Television... Recording Association, something like that. Basically anybody who works in like TV and movies on set is going to be part of SAG-AFTRA. That's a big deal. Already they had the premiere of I don't remember which Disney movie it was. I want to say Elemental, possibly. But there were no actors at the premiere. It was Disney characters who were the Disneyland actors who showed up on the red carpet. It's a difference. That's one way to do it. I saw some things that they're planning on doing, like fan events mostly for premieres and stuff like that. I feel like you shouldn't really just have to do a premiere, but whatever. And I know that Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer at the premiere, they left, or they they didn't even show up or something like that. And Christopher Nolan did like a little speech at the front and was like, yeah, this is shitty because come on, guys. And I was really genuinely disappointed. I can't actually be that surprised that what's his name at Disney, Bob Iger says, oh, it's so disturbing about what they're asking for. Dude makes $70K a day. They make less than that a year. So I'm not sure what's more disturbing there. And then there was the whole thing, of course, that somebody leaked that the like culmination, whatever they call their little club of corporations, are all planning on riding the strikes out until everybody basically runs out of money and is forced to go back to work because they're homeless. And then a few days later, they had the representative come out and say, oh, that was supplied by untrustworthy sources. We have no intention of not cooperating and blah, 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 blah. And everybody was like, yeah, you tried it. You got called out on it. And now you're out faking innocence. Come on, guys. That's low. That's cheap, also. There was some fun stuff at Anime Expo 2023 a few weeks ago. I will probably never go to Anime Expo because it is a horror show of people. Just they sell like 5 times the amount of tickets as they have space in there. It's like 3-hour lines to even get into the building and finally onto the floor. But I'll have a link in the podcast notes about some of the Anime Expo news, in case you're interested in that. One of the things that's been revealed recently is that Warner Brothers Japan and WIT Studio are doing a Suicide Squad isekai, based on the various DC characters. Of course, Harley Quinn and the Joker are going to be the main two as a part of it. Based on the trailer, it looks like they are doing the two of them as a couple still, so that's going to be kind of sucky to see all of those thumbnails and profile pictures of the teenagers who think that that's such a hot, romantic, whatever, power couple. It's not. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. In case you do not know it, isekai means another world and is a really popular, probably the most popular current trope, or genre rather, in Japanese anime. As for WIT Studio, they are known for the projection of anime series such as Attack on Titan, The Ancient Magus' Bride, Ranking of Kings, Spy X Family, and the upcoming Spy X Family Code White movie. So they have a lot of really good stuff behind them. We also learned recently, Laid Back Camp is getting Season 3 in 2024, but with a new studio and staff, so hopefully they'll have the same actors. It doesn't look like they have actors yet. They have a new character designer, a returning composer, thank goodness, because that stuff's gold. Returning sound director, and new series composition, and new director. So we'll see about the cast, I think, in a little bit. But what I'm hoping is that since we're getting a Season 3 soon, in the next 6 to 12 months, that we will be getting Season 2 dubbed sooner than that, because we still don't have Season 2 dubbed in English yet. I don't have very much news on it, but Greta Gerwig is going to be writing and directing at least 2 Chronicles of Narnia movies for Netflix. I saw a really funny joke online. The story of it is real, it's not a joke, that it was Andrew Garfield, I want to say, was the one who was going to play Prince Caspian originally. It was between him and Ben Barnes, who ended up getting the role. And I guess Andrew Garfield was in an interview one time saying that he always thought he didn't get the role because he wasn't as attractive as Ben Barnes, which is kind of a sad thing to say. But he did get Spider-Man, so I guess he didn't really lose in the end. And he is a straight white man in Hollywood. I'm sure he is fine. He's not one of the ones who's probably looking to get a second job while he's acting, you know. That's why they're doing the whole strike. It's because most people do have to do that. But anyway, Greta Gerwig, as we know, has a pretty solid background of writing movies and shows and things that are really fantastic. Barbie, of course, is hers, so that'll be a fun one that's coming out soon. But anyway, some people were saying that it would be funny if she cast Andrew Garfield as Prince Caspian. He's obviously way too old for that at this point, but it was kind of a funny thought. Polygon Pictures is going to be releasing the Spider-Man freshman year animated series for Disney+. We have some information on Polygon Pictures. It says they are known among Japanese animation circles for the 2 Ajin television anime series and film trilogy and Godzilla Kaiju Wakusei film trilogy. They also contributed to 2008 Star Wars The Clone Wars, Amazon and Polygon's Pictures Lost in Oz Extended Adventure, and some other things. Knights of Sidonia, I think it says they adapted Knights of Sidonia. That was one that I watched. It was a little bit odd, animation-wise, to be honest. So we'll see. I'm sure Spider-Man Freshman Year will be a fun one to watch no matter what they do, as long as they do not try to put Spider-Boy in it. Did you want to talk about Spider-Boy? No, you probably don't want to.
Dude, yeah, Spider-Boy, his hit's known as, and then that one time he was a Spider-Man and he... That's basically the gist of what they're trying to retcon him into every big moment Spider-Man's ever had, and they're trying to say that he's been around since the 60s. So that's why I make that joke of, like, Spider-Boy from his massive hit in that issue. And then he did the thing when he saved Peter in issue.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Lastly, before we get into the shows and movies, Sailor Moon and Hello Kitty, or rather Sanrio, are getting crossovers here. Do they have all of the character names? Okay, so I don't know the Sanrio character names. That's the only issue here. Because I'm trying to find the pairings that they did. They're so cute. You get, obviously, Hello Kitty and Sailor Moon Usagi. You get Kuromi and Sailor Mars, for some reason. I don't think I know Cinnamoroll and Sailor Mercury. And I don't think I know any of the other names of these characters. I need to get better at my Sanrio stuff. Yeah, I don't know their names. But it's really cute. They are a little bit pricey though, so if you want to get like the plushes and stuff, and then they have a bunch of random stuff like a compact and a hairpin, and the stickers actually look pretty baller. I'm probably going to check that out. Link for that article is in the podcast notes, and those will not be going on sale until the end of August anyway. We're going to kick it off with Secret Invasion. You've been paying attention to that much more than me, but the general gist of it that I get is we know Nick Fury's wife is a Skrull. He knows that too. She was supposed to get close to him in order to kill him, but the woman who she took over, or whose life she took over, basically mimicked, they got really close, and she made her promise not to hurt Nick, and so she can't kill him. Emilia Clarke's character was gonna die and then didn't die, so she's not dead. She's a Super Skrull now,
yeah,
right?
she knew that she was gonna betray Gravik, so she took the Super Soldier Serum knowing that he was gonna shoot and kill her, because she had a feeling that would save her, because what they're doing in the MCU is that the Super Skrull is, it's Extremis, Nanotech, and Groot, and I can't remember what the fourth one is for it.
How long till we see that in the comics?
Yeah, no, right? MCU synergy, go. I've dug it and enjoyed it because this is the kind of stuff. I definitely, I think you said before when we weren't recording before, that they saw the success of Andor and how that played out, and they're like, oh, maybe we should do the same. This probably would have done a lot better if they did it maybe a year or two after Winter Soldier. But now it's like kind of like the weird fatigue thing, and then I also Kevin Smith said this as well. He said he thinks the reason a lot of people aren't watching is because it's the first Disney Plus show that's not the name of a hero, so people have no idea what it is. I think, and I also think it's like that, and I think a lot of people aren't enjoying it because they're expecting it to be this like MCU humor joke fest, when it's not. It's meant to be like cloak and dagger, espionage, like whodunit, don't trust anybody, always look over your shoulder kind of vibes, which I enjoy. I kind of like that because, you know, if you want to like go and watch a fun movie, you'll put on Ragnarok, but if I want to watch, you know, an MCU spy thriller, they're not going to be able to do a full spy thriller because, you know, it's still MCU stuff, but if you want to get that close feeling, this is it. I'm excited to see where it goes, but the only complaint I would have is that they should have made all the episodes an hour long instead of episode 1 and 2 is an hour long, and then episode 3 and 4 like 30 minutes long. Just do them all an hour long if it's 6 or 8 episodes.
It's really frustrating as a viewer.
It does. Yeah, because it really messes up the pacing, and it's like, if you want to do that, just do 7 episodes, make them an hour long each instead of doing 9 episodes and like have 2 be 30 minutes long.
And now Talos is dead.
Yes, Talos is dead. It was kind of a moment because the whole time that he was trying to tell his daughter, Emilia Clarke's character, is that the humans will accept us if we show them that we are naturally Skrulls as good people. So he dies saving the President of the United States.
So dramatic.
Very dramatic, and it's kind of whatever, but it probably couldn't afford Ben Mendelsohn because he's a pretty good actor and he's expensive. And the biggest reveal, I think, was that Rhodey was a Skrull.
Yes. We have an interesting theory on that.
Yes, which a lot of people kind of saw coming, but I think the Rhodey we see in Endgame is definitely him. I think Rhodey, between the time of Falcon and Winter Soldier and this, is when he got switched out. And that when you see the reveal that Loki is a Skrull, it's specifically a woman Skrull impersonating him. And the reason why that's important is because Rhodey's job now is the right hand to the President of the United States. And the reason why that's a big deal, and our theory is that this is actually the Skrull Queen.
Yeah, in the comics, the Skrull Queen has a different character that she takes over and lives as for, I think it's many, many years, and that is Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. It's important to note this because there are 2 key places where Spider-Woman sits at that point in the comics. That is, 1, the very close friend and confidant to Carol Danvers. 2, extremely high security. She is like top 3 members of the Avengers at that point for those years. That is a extremely significant period of her character's history, and then you find out that it is entirely not even her. Those are the 2 big deals because she's such a high security, basically, character, and she has this relationship with Carol Danvers. Rhodey in the MCU has already been confirmed to have some kind of friendship / interest in Carol Danvers. We know that in the comics they're pushing their romance again in the coming months in a new Marvel Infinity, I think it is, series, which is, I'm sure, at some point going to end up in print. Why do they ever push characters in the comics? Because it's going to show back up in the movies. I think that Rhodey and Carol's relationship is going to kind of take center stage at some point in the movies, but which maybe the real Rhodey at that point. So that's half the theory. The other half of the theory being, of course, there he is with his high security clearance, just like Jessica Drew had at that point in being the Skrull Queen. It just makes sense. He's an equivalent to, more or less, very high profile in the government, high profile to the Avengers, high security clearance, enormous amounts of knowledge that she would learn by taking over the body. A little bit of an equivalent to Jessica Drew in the comics. That's the way that we see it, at least, because it just fits. It feels like it fits.
And one thing as well, if you're the queen, you know, and you want to be treated royal, and like royalty and get all the best of the best, where else would you go then besides a high-ranking, powerful position like that, where there's literally only one person above you, the president. So she could keep that lifestyle she had, have all the nice things, kick back and relax. And then another thing that I thought was really funny about it is that in the previous episode, they had a really great scene of, like, just actors acting it out, Don Cheadle and Samuel L. Jackson, you know, like, talking about what it means to be black. And then it's funny when Samuel L. Jackson goes back, he's kind of starting to put two and two together, like, this might not be my roadie. So he starts, you know, like, I call it the cookout questions. He starts, starts talking about, like, E and J and, like, stuff like that. And then I love like, you can see that, like, the Skrull acting as Don Cheadle roadie kind of is, like, racing. You can see, like, she's
trying to get ahead.
Yes, you can see that she's, like, you can see that she's scanning Rhodey's memories, trying to find something to, like, bring down the suspicion of it all. So it's really kind of funny that you can definitely start to see that even Nick Fury is like, okay. And it also makes sense. He was literally married to one, so he would know the cues and things to look for it. But then when he ends up finding out that he can't push too far, is that Skrull Queen Rhodey has video evidence of Gravik as Nick Fury shooting and killing Mariah Hill.
Oh, God.
So he pulls that up and is like, yeah, if you go anywhere disputing this nonsense that aliens taking over the government, I'm just going to show them this, man. Like, just really gets him in a bind. And I think that's when you kind of cuts Samuel Jackson. He kind of knows that, like, okay, this is not Rhodey anymore. This is not the guy that I came up with. And then one last thing to wrap it all up. As he walked out, they were sharing a drink of cognac. Rhodey makes a joke of, like, oh, it's poison in here. And Samuel Jackson goes, nah, it's the nanotech you gotta worry about. Chuckles. It was the nanotech tracer inside the cognac. So now Nick Fury knows everywhere that I still think Queen Skrull Rhodey is going now. So that was, like, a nice little funny. May have lost that little battle, but it's still going.
The war is still on.
Yes.
Hasn't lost the war.
Yeah.
So then, Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, we have episodes 3, 4, and 5 to briefly go over. Episode 3 was titled Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This was an alternate timeline that La'an gets sent to completely on accident. I guess somebody from the past or something travels to her time. And then when he dies, history changes, and suddenly she is on not Pike's ship, but on Kirk's ship, the Enterprise. So history kind of changes, a couple other changes too. And so she ends up trying to convince Captain Kirk that this is what's happened, and she's from a different reality, and she needs to save it, blah, blah, blah. And she very clearly, well, first off, they end up back going into the past together to stop whatever the issue is that changed history. He accidentally ends up tagging along with her, basically. And she very much falls for him, and I think he probably kind of falls for her too. Unfortunately, when they save the day and go back to their regular timeline, he doesn't remember any of that. But it's still really friggin' cute, though. La'an, you know, she's been the one who's like the tough motherfucker of the group. It's her and Una who are like the really tough ones, but she's like a whole kind of other level. And so it was really cute to see her go back to her room after fixing everything and just instinctively pull out her phone and dial him. And when he answers, she's like, she doesn't even know what to say. She was just like, I just wanted to talk to him. And so she just like, she makes something up and is just like, oh, just so you know, we did this check for you. Okay, yeah, we'll check in later. And did she ask him out to dinner?
No, she was asking for somebody else's clearance, and then he was like, are you sure that's all it's about? And then he's
and then he kind of catches on.
And he catches on, and then he said, did you want to finish asking me these questions over dinner?
That's right, yeah.
But that was such a great episode, but also crushing, because it's like, you really see her, like, because it was the whole theme of the episode was like, no, you need to take down some of these walls and let somebody in and have a good relationship.
It's okay to let somebody in.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that it's him, although it does concern me a little bit, because obviously she's not in the original series, so what happens to her? Yeah, that's with all the characters who are as far as I know, number one, Ortegas, La'an, they're all original characters. We have no idea what's going to happen to them between.
And Nurse Chapel too, yeah.
Yeah, well, Nurse Chapel, she's in the original series.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, she's.
But yeah, I really, really liked that. That was a lot of fun. Episode 4 was Among the Lotus Eaters. This was another really fun one. Oh, they're all really fun. But also pure to don't let me forget to talk about Doctor Who.
Okay.
pure to the Star Trek heart. So really fantastic in that sense. That's what I want from my Star Trek, is it's stick to that heart, and that's 100% what Strange New Worlds has done. Among the Lotus Eaters, it is a planet that they end up sending a what do they call them, surface crew, whatever they call them, to this planet, and they don't know the planet has really this particular kind of radiation because of a meteor that's around it, that really basically throughout the day ends up wiping your entire memory, and then every night wipes your memory of the previous day. And so the people who live on the planet or moon or whatever it is, they have to basically just get by with assuming that what people tell them is reality and stuff. And so what you find out is this guy who used to be on the crew of the Enterprise, but who got stranded there without their knowledge. They thought he was dead. He discovers that the chapel that's built there blocks the radiation, so he can keep his memories, and his soldiers, who he eventually gets in charge of, because of course nobody can remember anything but him, so he tells them he's in charge. They believe him. So he gets in charge. The soldiers remember to follow him, but everybody else just works and does what he tells them to do because they don't remember anything, so they just believe him. And then of course you get, it's Spock, La'an, or is it Una? It's Spock, Kirk, and no. I'm completely wrong. It's Mbenga,
Pike, and Leon.
Is it La'an?
La'an, yes.
I really liked Mbenga's, he was a great example for him, and Ortega's actually great, because that's the same thing that happens to them up on the ship, because it's an asteroid that's causing this radiation to wipe memories. Great examples for what the whole purpose of it was. No matter what they forgot memory-wise, they remembered their purpose. So Mbenga remembers that he's a healer, and Ortegas remembers that she is a pilot. Yeah, that was so a cool. Great scene with her and Spock up on the ship. I really liked that.
Yeah, God, yeah. And that was so, sorry, I'm gonna get stuck in the little thing, but it was so cool, because I just remember that scene, because it's you see the memory wipe happen,
mm-hmm.
and then she wakes up, and she's like, what the I'm in space? I'm driving, how do I do this? And then, as that happens, 2 seconds later, it starts to happen with Spock, and
mm-hmm.
so Spock starts to freak out. She's like, who are you? Who are you? And then, they have to move because the other asteroids are coming towards them, and she's like...
They just have to figure it out.
And then she goes, I don't know, but it's something in me telling me that I'm the only person that can do this.
Yeah!
And then she just, zips around on the ship. That was so cool.
Yeah, I really loved that. And then in the end, they end up getting the asteroid pulled away from the planet, so everything can be okay again.
Yeah, and then my favorite one was when Pike... he has the confrontation with him in the chapel.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's like, oh, you left me here. And then, Pike starts to remember who he is because he's been in the chapel long enough. And he's like, I mourned you. He was like, we were sad. He was like... And then
we had a whole ceremony.
Yeah, he's like, we had a whole ceremony for you. And then him hearing that is like, oh, wow, they actually did care. And he's like, what are you going to do with me now? He's like, I'm going to bring you home.
Yeah.
Such a great captain thing to say. And it's in that moment of he lost all who he was, but he remembered those values of Starfleet and being a good captain and getting your crew home and saving people.
Yep. Yeah, again, just true to the Star Trek heart.
Yes. Yeah.
And then episode 5 this past week was called Charades. This one was basically, Nurse Chapel and Spock were in a crash that some space entity kind of happened over, I believe, or that they caused on accident somehow. Mm-hmm. And being a magical space entity of undisclosed origins or whatever, they were able to, quote-unquote, fix the two of them being wounded. Spock, though, being different, it was two things. It was the fact that they saw him as kind of two separate people, and they also saw him as being different from Nurse Chapel, so they chose the side of him that looked like Chapel, who was the one he was with, and they wiped out the Vulcan side of his DNA completely. And so he spends the whole episode basically learning how to be a human, and control these emotions and all this stuff that he's never had to even probably worry about in that way before. And of course, at the same time, his fiancée T'Pring has come. Her mother is a massive traditionalist in the terms of Vulcan stuff. She would be horrified to know. And then, of course, in the end, he ends up coming clean about all of it because that's really the foundation of what you're trying to do here, right? Is have an honest relationship. They're trying to get married. But then after all that, he's Vulcan again, right? Yeah, he's Vulcan again.
He gets Vulcan, yeah.
And then he and Chapel, I'm not going to say they get it on, but they definitely make out a little bit.
Yeah, I thought the thing that was so great about, because like the whole time through the ceremony, they're just like dunking on his human mom, just like talking trash. And he was going to
lose it.
And he's like sitting there like holding it in, and then the
actress who played his mom, I can't remember who she is, but she's great.
Yes, and then they said something like, "Yes, good thing your Vulcan side came through and finished this. A human would have never been able to do it." And that was like the thing.
That was the moment. He's like, "All right, I got to tell him."
Yeah, that was the thing. Like
disrespectful.
That one drip of water that sends the thing flowing over is Spock. So Spock pulls off the fake ears and says, "What makes me strong is because my human mom." Just like you're saying, another great Star Trek moment of it all. And then it was really cool to see like him fully embrace his human side between that scene and the one of him hanging out with his crewmates drinking, and then he finally gets the joke. So great.
So, just to wrap up today's episode, we've been watching Doctor Who. It is, what's her name? Being the only thing you really need to know. You don't actually need to know her name, because there's only been one female Doctor Who. And, like, Adam heard all the bad stuff, the bad rap that it was getting when it was coming out, and he is equally as shocked as I was when I was watching it, at how it's not at all like the rap it was getting. It's pretty much classic Who, the way Who has always been.
Well, we got through, 6 or 7 episodes last night?
No, at least 4 or 5.
Okay.
I want to watch more of that tonight. Let's do that.
I'm done.
Okay.
I haven't watched any of it, so I went in just only hearing the people dunking on it. And
he's watched other Doctor Who,
yes,
though.
I've caught up on all the other Doctor Who's.
This is the one he hasn't seen.
Excuse me. I think I said it 5 or 6 times when we were watching those episodes. I don't get this. This feels just like Doctor Who. Even her mannerisms are Doctor Who. The things she does is Doctor Who. Her fucking personality is Doctor Who. The one of the first things you see. Oh, empty pockets. I hate empty pockets. It's such a Doctor Who thing to say.
Yep.
It's just a lot of.
If you can imagine a cringy 14-year-old trying to be that, and you just internally, your whole body just kind of cringes at the thought. That's a good Doctor Who line.
Yeah, because
Some kid trying to do it.
Doctor Who is this weird, eccentric alien who comes to Earth and is just fascinated by what we have. And
it only works because he's actually an alien.
Yes, and so that's why, the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, this feels like Doctor Who, because I've watched all the other ones from the OG guy with Billy Piper to Matt Smith and David Tennant and everybody
Eccleston.
in between. So it feels along with me. Maybe I'm not a real Doctor Who fan.
Well, another thing that we were bringing up is there is second episode of her season, Rosa Parks.
Yes.
I was tearing up at the end of that episode. I don't know if that was a big moment, showing that we say all this dumb shit about, you can name a star after yourself. Could you imagine ever going out into space and looking at that thing and
well,
that would be a moment, and that's why I was kind of having a moment there.
And then that was a great episode, really done well. And I think one of the things that did it great was that having that young man see it as well, his perspective and his acting of going back and seeing that. And then the woman who played Rosa Parks killed it.
Yes, she did
absolutely killed it. She reminded me of as somebody who grew up in the Bible Belt South.
He's from South Carolina, guys.
So she reminded me of so many of those goodness to earth, great black women who just want to help other people, not even for their own personal gain, just want to help people and want everybody to be happy.
She comes across a British, very dark-skinned black man kind of following her home, finds out more or less quickly that he's not dangerous, invites him to come join their meeting.
Yeah, and then it's so funny.
That was her very clearly opening the door to somebody into that community that he very much was looking for.
And then he has a great line to her talking, because this is before she doesn't give her seat up on the bus, so she has no idea. He's from the future, and he lets her know that this fight will be worth it. That was so great. And then just the look at her face, and then when she finally does get taken in, she just gives him that silent nod as she gets taken off the bus.
Yeah. So on that side, we were talking about how people are probably mad. This is why people are mad at the shows, because it's very female forward, it's very people of color forward, blah blah blah. That's really what Doctor Who's always been. Am I wrong? We remember, what's his name? Billy Piper's boyfriend, Rose's original boyfriend. Remember Martha, the black, very dark-skinned black companion? Like, this is not new, guy. I don't know why people suddenly are, like, offended by this stuff that Doctor Who has always done.
Another thing that whenever we finished watching it last night, I was like, this is exactly like the Van Gogh episode with Matt Smith and Karen Gillan that everybody loves.
Yes, that was kind of, the Rosa Parks one was very much along that line.
Exactly the same, but just with a different character, and people complain about it. It's really funny. But you know the difference. One of them is a ginger and one of them is a black woman. So
yeah. But the thing that I wanted to mention, because we were just talking about Star Trek. I mentioned this to you yesterday. Kind of point for point, culturally, Star Trek is to America what Doctor Who is to Britain.
Yeah.
Point for point. Don't try to tell me it's Star Wars. It's not Star Wars. It's fucking Star Trek. That weird ass shit. That weird, like, the TV cult phenomenon.
Yeah.
Not only that, and I need somebody, or I need to educate myself. I need to figure out who created Doctor Who, because we obviously know. We know the story of Gene Roddenberry. If you haven't seen that comic by the Oatmeal, you are doing yourself a disservice. Look up Gene Roddenberry. Look up Star Trek: The Oatmeal. That's all you need to know. Click on what you see. You will read it. You will probably have your heart torn out and pumped for you by the cartoonist a little bit. But yeah, the weird cult classicness, the fact that it goes back into, like, the weird 60s, like, we don't know how to write television, you know, but they're gonna do it anyway. And people, like, adore the older stuff, like, way more than they adore the newer stuff, and they're always talking about how, oh, we want the old Trek back, we want the old Doctor Who back, you know. It's point for point that, but then also the spirit of the thing that started Gene Roddenberry to make Star Trek, that I'm sure is somewhere behind the inspiration of whatever the heck Doctor Who came from on that other side of the planet, practically. You know, they are the same beast. It is the constant desire to do better, to be the good person. What is the line from Mr. Rogers that he said, what his mom would always say? Look for the helpers in a disaster situation. That is the spirit. That right there, Mr. Rogers, you can throw him in with the group. That is the spirit of these two products, Doctor Who and Star Trek, of being multicultural and multi-ethnic and all of these other things. From the get-go, that's always what they were supposed to be. Now, I don't know 100% about old Who, but from 2005, I know for sure that's what it was. I just had that epiphany yesterday and was like, holy shit, Star Trek is Doctor Who for Americans, and the other way around as well. Let me know if you agree. I don't see how you wouldn't. Anything else to add?
No. Yeah.
Alright. We're going to turn our fans back on. It is triple degree weather outside. And I'll hopefully be back sooner than this time it's been. I've had some health issues, and it's just been hot, man. It's hard to think when it's this hot. Death Valley is only a few hours away from me, and it's going to get potentially the highest temperature ever, what'd they say, ever reasonably measured.
Yeah.
That's a scary statement, so...
Can't you cook eggs at that temperature?
So when I was a kid in Bakersfield, we tried that once, and she kept poking at it, my friend. I think if we had left it sit there, it probably would have started to cook. Because, I mean, if the ground's too hot for you to stand on, you gotta be able to cook something on it, right? Like, that's kind of makes sense. Anyway, enough talking about the miserable heat that we're in. Give it a month and hopefully it'll be over, fingers crossed. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the remainder of July. Jessica Cruz's image post is on my site. I'm gonna do it eventually. Yeah. Don't be a dickhead. Bye.